Hey you guys, this is Jessica and Noam here at Rax Tracks with Reverb for another episode of What's That Sound? Today we're exploring how to get the drum sound you hear in Exit Music by Radiohead.
It is super blown out and wild sounding. It was supposedly recorded in a child's bedroom with a bunch of stuffed animals. We're gonna figure out how they did it.
For our drums, we used our vintage Gretsch kit with a Ludwig super light snare with a big fat snare drum on top of it. For our cymbals, we used K-Dark Zildjian hi-hats. We also used a K-Dark Zildjian crash cymbal and a K-Sweet Zildjian ride.
Okay, so for the Radiohead Exit Music drum sound, this sound is so bombastic and like wild for the time that it had to be controlled in some way. And the first thing that you'll notice when you listen to this record is that the way that they controlled this sound was by recording it with a single overhead. Now, doing mono drums does a couple things. Obviously, it focuses the sound, right? But it also allows you to have wild frequency ranges, right? You can take up a ton of high-end space and still be leaving space for things to exist on the edges of the mix. So if you took this same sound that we're creating, which is really, really compressed and takes up a ton of energy, and you made it a stereo drum sound, all of a sudden your guitars are really, really struggling to get through it. You have to do a lot of carving out of frequencies and making sure you don't have too much high end and making sure your compression is not too intense so that you have room for other instruments, right? Here, it's all mono, we have room for everything, and we can kind of go as ballistic as we want with it. The other thing that you'll notice immediately when you listen to this drum sound is that the compression is not in parallel. You can tell this because when the compressor clamps down on that snare drum, you can hear the clamping, right? You can hear it, the snare coming through and then it pulling it back. And it adds a huge amount of snap to the snare. It means that we have to be really, really careful about our attack and release times, right? Because we're almost looking at the compressor on this drum set as like a musical instrument. If we set our attack time completely differently, it sounds like a completely different snare drum. If we set our release times differently, it can sound like a different tempo altogether, right? Getting the release time to be exactly right here, it almost makes the drums feel like they're like in slow motion or something. And so much of that is just making sure that as that compressor clamps down every time it hits the snare drum, it slowly comes back and it'll just about come back to the point where it's not compressing before that next downbeat hits, right? So getting that timing exactly right is a musical choice. And in this case, it's a really, really impactful musical choice because it's gonna make these drums sound completely differently if we don't get it exactly right. Let's listen to just the kick drum. This, we used an iFET, right? That's a FET 47 clone. And we used that because we knew we didn't need a ton of attack on this kick drum, and we knew we could just have an out microphone that would give us body, but didn't have to be too high-endy and clicky. Let's take a listen. A very nice kick drum sound, not anything special about it, right? We didn't even do any compression on it. It's just a basic run-of-the-mill kick drum sound. We're taking away a little bit of mid-range, like you often do with kicks, and we're adding a little bit of 100 hertz and below with a shelf. But outside of that, it's just a good sounding kick drum. Let's listen to the snare. So here's our snare top. This was a SM57. Again, basic sound. We took a lot of care in how we were tuning the drum. We gave it a lot of specificity in like where the pitch was, and we also dampened it, right, with a big fat snare drum, and then really, really controlled how tight the snares were, because the snares were controlling what the length of the drum was, and we knew that was going to be a really big deal because we were going to compress this until all of that ring was going to come out. So we needed to make sure it wasn't too long, it wasn't too short, it was just right. We also added a bottom snare mic. A lot of this snare sound has the sound of the snares themselves, right? And the top is going to give you a little bit of that, but adding the bottom helps quite a bit. We had an AKG 414 on the bottom of the snare. All right, let's check out the tom mics. Those were 414s. Again, nothing terribly special about how we recorded them. We just needed a little bit of extra impact on the toms. Pretty straight up, basic tom sound. It's not going to be a ton of the sound, right? We're going to use a little bit, but it is really meant as like adding some impact to what we already have, which is our overhead sound, and that's going to be a lot of the tom sound as well. One of the most critical things of recording toms in general is making sure that your phase is accurate between your overheads and your tom microphones. Now that is a almost random relationship, right? As in, you mic up a tom, if you move that microphone an inch, it can completely change the way that the phase relationship is, and you have to flip the phase on it, right? So it's not a matter of knowing exactly what you're supposed to do. It's a matter of checking the phase, always in mono, because that's the easiest way to hear phase. Listen to your overhead, listen to your tom, make sure that they're well balanced so that you're not hearing way more of one or way more of the other. Flip the phase on the tom and see which one gives you more low end and which one feels more present, which one feels like it comes closer to you. That's what's going to give you the best tom sound. On this particular one, we had to flip the phases because these toms were sounding really, really thin, and as soon as we flip the phase, all of a sudden, they're right in your face. For the overhead, we used a Neumann KM84, right? This is a vintage small diaphragm condenser mic. It is a really, really good microphone. It's teeny tiny, but it packs a lot of punch and it has a lot of weight, way more than you'd expect from such a small capsule. It also, because it's a small diaphragm microphone, it has a ton of detail, right? And that's the main reason that we chose it for this, is we could hear that the way that they recorded it, there was a lot of high end going. It's a pretty bright sound in general, but there also was just like a ton of detail. Even through all the compression, we could hear there's a lot of detail in the high end. I believe, supposedly, they may have used like really crappy Octavia microphones or something for this, but we chose to just like go with a really great pencil condenser. All right, so let's hear the whole drum sound together without the compression first off. It sounds exactly like every other drum set you have ever heard. There's nothing terribly spectacular about this drum set. It's whatever, right? We also very purposefully are not using any compression anywhere on that kit because we know that every single ounce of this drum is going to go through a really intense compressor. Picking the compressor was a really big deal. I tried a bunch of different ones. What I landed on was a 1176, right? This is a Silverface 1176. Those compressors have a really, really aggressive attack, right? You can really pop out the transients by controlling how much of the drum you let through the compressor before you clamp down with compression. You're controlling how much transient you're putting on the snare drum, the kick drum, the toms, right? Everything will have this kind of spike at the beginning of it, and the 1176 is like a perfect compressor to do that with. It goes really fast, so you can get as little as you need to, but you can also get really, really big attacks, really sharp attacks, kind of anything you want with that compressor. For the release, we were just, again, listening for the musicality of it. It wasn't that we wanted the needle to get back up to 0 every time, it's just that you want it to be dancing in a musical sounding way, right? If you set it too long, you're not gonna get the impact of like this kind of pumping sound, right? If you set it too short, you're gonna get these cymbals rushing back into you, and it almost is gonna sound like it's a different rhythm, right? It's not gonna have this like slow motion underwater feeling that you get when you have this perfect compressor with exactly the right amount of release time. That's all the pieces. Let's hear it all together. That's how we got Radiohead's Exit Music drum sound.
Let us know in the comments what other drum sounds you'd like to see us break down, and please, if you've been using our sample packs, link your projects in the comments so we could check those out. We'd love to know how you're using them, and we'll see you next time.